Hello, everyone. We're here for episode 7 of Ethnically Correct. Can you all believe it?
Wow. Amazing.
I know. And we're joined, obviously, by our blogger and friend, Winter White. Hi, Winter.
Hello.
And then by our good friend, Tehu Smythe. How are you, Tehu?
Good evening. Fine, thank you.
All right. So episode 7, the number 7 is very symbolic in many cultures. It's perfection, it's God, it's so many things. But for us, it's our unique opportunity and foray into a very weighty subject. And all of us had trepidation about going there, but we feel impelled and compelled by the current discourse in the United States. And for those of you that may not be aware, and if you're tuning in and from all over the world, recently we had our president, Barack Obama, issue a statement from the White House where he is going to propose executive action, 35 measures actually, to tackle the issue of gun proliferation in America and the gun violence. So just to give you some statistics from 2015, this was as of December 3rd, we have had 353 mass shootings, 62 shootings at schools, 12,223 people killed in gun incidents, and 24,722 people injured in gun incidents. This is from the Shooting Tracker.
OMG.
Yeah, the Shooting Tracker Gun Violence Archive. And those numbers are staggering, especially when you juxtapose them to other civilized nations, such as Australia, the United Kingdom, and Canada, which are 3 other Anglo-Saxon primary countries where they have made great inroads in passing legislation to very much curtail the proliferation of guns in their societies, and their results have been amazing. And we here in the United States, for a number of reasons, which we'll discuss in the show, have not been able to achieve those results. So our spin on this topic is our own sort of unique experience with guns as children and as adults, and how those experiences have informed our opinions vis-a-vis guns and their availability in society. So I just want to get a litmus test from you guys. Where do you stand on the subject currently, and give us maybe a couple of reasons why your opinion is as such, and whoever wants to start.
So, I didn't grow up around guns. None of the men in my family felt a need to have a gun. My mother didn't feel a need to have a gun. As a single woman growing up in a very gang-infested neighborhood, I heard gunshots growing up. These were huge fears, and still there was no, need or fear, so much so that we had a gun in the house. So for me, the fact that people are so up in arms about this, it escapes me, because in my mind, I think, I've never heard the headline, a crazy maniacal person goes into a bank and shoots the bank up, and the one lone person who had a gun saved everybody. Exactly. So for me, guns have done nothing more than be destructive for people. And please correct me if I'm wrong, ethnically correct listeners, where is the story that says that, a gun saved a family from a maniacal person? We have less strict gun laws now. And as Alex said in those statistics, killing is at an all-time high. And so I guess my stance is, what can we do? We need to rethink how we distribute guns in America. So this discussion has to start somewhere.
Absolutely. And, I had an equal childhood experience where I grew up in South Los Angeles, and I did a poll the other day on Facebook, and I said, how many of you have ever been in a situation where you thought to yourself, oh my God, if I had a gun at this juncture in time, I would be in a better position because I faced this extraordinary challenge to my safety. And I have to say, I've been in the same community since I can remember. And so it's been 35 years that I've lived in South Los Angeles in the North University Park area, which is just north of USC. And yes, in the 80s and 90s, when gangs sort of ruled Los Angeles, there were gunshots. I remember that I was going with my aunt to a fair, a little fair that stood itself up makeshift style across from our church, and that as we were entering the park, gunfire kind of erupted, and so we ran for 2 or 3 blocks. I have to say that as a child, I never saw a gun. I know that my dad one day caught some bullets from someone because they didn't want to keep the bullets, and they felt that my dad was a more responsible citizen and he could keep them. And I remember being absolutely awestruck at what they look like and how heavy they were. And then it dawned on me that these are instruments of annihilation, that people get killed and wounded because of these little golden bullets. And so I was terrified, and I remember thinking that I would never wanted to inflict any injury on anyone, and why anyone would ever imagine that owning a gun would be a good solution for their family. In that poll, one of my teachers said, well, I was approached by some young thugs at the corner of Exposition and Figueroa at the Chevron station, and if I had had a gun at the moment, I would have fared better. I don't know about that, because even if you're in a carjacking situation and somebody approaches you, you have a wheel of an active car
right
in front of you.
Right.
And if somebody is pointing a gun, they will most likely shoot. The amount of time it would take you to get into the glove compartment,
exactly,
to pull out the gun, to retaliate back, you're already a dead person anyway.
Yeah.
So even in those kind of situations, they already have the upper hand, because malice and malintent will always find a way to radically jumpstart or go ahead of the person that is the victim, because you're not prepared, because you're neutralized by just living your life, and then this shock of attack comes your way.
It's the illusion of protection.
Right.
Yes.
But it's actually an illusion, because the reality of it is that you won't have enough time when you're actually faced with a situation.
Right. And even as a man, I mean, it takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of stamina to be able to hold that thing and point and then shoot, because they're absolutely powerful instruments. And Tehu, I can imagine growing up in Great Britain. You grew up in Great Britain at a time when guns were not necessarily even held by the police.
No, not at all. So it's interesting. America was always viewed as a very violent country because of the fact that it is so easily to go out and purchase a gun and be in the possession of one. And that it was always kind of frowned upon. And the overwhelming theme was that, civilized countries don't have access to guns easily, because that's what makes you a civilized country. I didn't grow up with guns at all. Gun violence, luckily, none of that was in the realm of any of our thoughts. Learning about guns and the gun violence is relatively a new phenomenon for me. It never really came into the society that I grew up in. The police, Scotland Yard, the UK during the time I was growing up actually weren't even armed. The police were notoriously known not to be armed in the UK for a very long time. They were known as bobbies, and they were not armed. And England prized itself for being such a safe country because of that. And it worked absolutely fine. No one was killing the police either, as far as I remember. There wasn't any headlines of any of that. It's changed a little bit now. The police are now since been armed. They've had to be. There's been a lot of, changes in society of Britain. But, it's a very non-tolerant nation when it comes to gun control.
And something that really struck me about what you said, Winter, is that all of your male figures growing up, none of them felt compelled to own a gun, and and to prove their masculinity and their bravado by having one. Yet on Empire, right, both Lucius and several of the main characters are gun-owning people. And it's almost like that show, as amazing as it is, as trailblazing as it has proven for African Americans in the society, still perpetuates some of these myths about rappers and industry moguls and people that come from a certain socioeconomic background, that their way of being successful and their way of moving ahead is through being these macho dudes that have guns and that they basically wipe out everybody that gets in their way.
And, you know, I think we have to keep in mind that, you know, this culture of guns and everything is wrapped up in this kind of gangster culture, right?
Yes.
So, you know, a lot of these men, you know, you'll see if you ever watched MTV Cribs, you go in their home and they have the quintessential Al Pacino Scarface, you know, poster.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You had to watch Cribs.
Okay, I'm sorry. I've been missing out.
That used to be one of my favorite shows.
Right. And, you know, most of the rappers had, you know, that was the epitome of success. It's like, even though he died at the end, you know, perpetuating this gangster lifestyle, and, you know, he died. He didn't win. He died. Yeah. To them, that was the epitome of like this very strong character.
Glorified.
Yeah. And so I think there's this, you know, it's very specific to the culture.
Right.
To the culture.
And how do these guys get those guns though? Because it takes a lot of money to get the guns. So another statistic that I found through the BBC News portal is that a lot of these guns are purchased through a black market, but a lot of times what will happen is an authorized seller will not necessarily record a transaction, and so they'll sell it illegally. Or two people go into a store and one does the background check, but the firearm is chosen by person B, right? And it's really for person B, and person B is not the one that has to go through the background check. It's the person A. So it's almost like you're getting a car, and the person with the higher FICO score, right, is the one that actually signs, but the other person is the one driving it.
Right.
So there's this whole system that we've built, which is why Obama was so adamant about really making the background checks that much more harder to avoid and much more strenuous. And I think that people say, well,
and why is that bad?
Right.
Why is that viewed as a bad thing? I really don't understand.
Well, individuals are saying that is basically criminalizing people, and one of the other measures is basically saying that if you're in the business of selling firearms, that you have to basically go through a rigorous process. And so the question is, who is in the business of selling firearms? So if I have 10 guns and I want to get rid of 5 of them and I sell them to a third party, am I in the business of selling guns? And then so do I have to get a special license and permit? And from my perspective, why not? If you're legitimately going to sell something, then I think it would be important for you to advise the government that you're selling somebody else a potential life-ending, you know,
a license
apparatus.
to kill.
Well,
license to kill.
This brings upon a question for me. People in the hood, people who are, you know, just everyday American citizens, not just even in the hood, but, you know, a lot of people put gun violence on African Americans and, you know, people in the hood. Where are they buying these automatic rifles from? You know, I mean, where are they getting it from? They're not producing these guns.
No.
Where are they coming from? And, you know, I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist or anything, but are they coming through, you know, from other countries? I mean, I don't want to put it on the government, but there have been conspiracy theorists who say, you know, the government kind of places these guns in certain people's hands. You know, there's, and not to go too deep into the conspiracy theory, but just to kind of give you an idea or to make you think, where is it coming from, really?
Right.
These automatic weapons. These are not just shotguns. These are, automatic weapons that people are using these days.
Yes, and with a lot of power, anything that shoots so rapidly and that basically can annihilate so many people at once is definitely a weapon of mass destruction.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that criminalizing something of this nature, as difficult as it is for people to consume and understand, it really helps us become a better people in our society. Because I don't know how many of you remember the shootings in Colorado when people were at a movie theater.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think about this growing up, when I went to school, when I went to the mall, when I went to whatever public place. There was no fear that somehow someone, a lunatic, was going to take a rifle that was meant for the military and then slaughter hundreds of people at once.
Right.
I mean, that's something that
It's tragic.
It's absolutely tragic. So what I want to ask,
And barbaric.
yeah, from a military from a Middle Eastern perspective, how are guns, viewed from the Persian community? Are they something that everybody holds, or that the man of the house holds, or how is that negotiated?
I'm not certain on this one, but from what I know, certainly I don't know any Middle Eastern people that actively own a gun. You see, a lot of when Middle Eastern people came to this country, came to the U.S., they came for a search of a better life with opportunities. And a lot of them were leaving countries that were in war zones and completely grief-stricken because of violence. And the last thing in the world that they wanted was to have that violence kind of be in their lives again. So essentially they wanted to leave all that behind. So for them to actively subscribe to it when you're searching of a new, better life wouldn't be, I don't think, from what I know, that a lot of, and please correct me if I'm wrong out there, folks, but I don't know of any families that actively subscribe to it. The concern is that the U.S. is becoming a very violent country, but even so, there isn't this need to go out and purchase a firearm for self-protection. I don't see that as a discourse which comes up in my community.
And I think, we have our opinions on guns because of where we grew up and how we grew up, and of course through our ethnic prism, and our experiences. But I welcome anyone to leave a message on our Facebook page at Ethnically Correct, or on Twitter, Ethnic Correct, and let us know if we're wrong. And this is something that I think needs to be discussed and openly discussed, because our experiences are not the same. So yeah, I welcome that.
I think a lot of folks said to me that I lived a very privileged childhood, and I thought to myself, well, I never thought that living in South LA was any kind of marker of privilege, but I guess, my parents shielded me from the harms of society, and therefore I grew up quite sheltered from it all. I would like to say the following when it comes to our president, and I think this has become something that he's been a stalwart defender of, and every single time that he's been forced to deliver a press conference after one of these mass shootings, his ire and his anger just grows, because every single time he's tried to get Congress, both chambers, to pass legislation to, again, just compel background checks at these massive rifle sales, it's been shot down. And the NRA, the National Rifle Association, they spend a lot of money on PR. And they spend a lot of money intimidating people and making them believe that the government is taking away their Second Amendment rights to bear arms. So, number one,
a really wealthy organization.
A very wealthy organization. So I think we have a lot to learn from them, right? Number one is they really get their people that are devoted and that are passionate about this topic to get to the voting booth and to vote for people that are going to be pro-gun. Secondly, it's important for us to realize that the Second Amendment was drawn up by individuals in the late 1790s when militias were really important in the edification of our country. Militias were protecting certain groups that may not have been well represented in the overall Federalist government. And the idea was that people that were part of militias could have the right to bear arms. And there was this great piece in the New Yorker recently where there was a fictitious mail exchange between James Madison and another fellow who basically said, you know what, punctuation wise, I think we should really call it out that you have to be a member of a militia. And the fake correspondent said, oh, you know, people will understand, right? They're never going to think that every single person is supposed to have the right to own a gun. And yet to this day, it seems like every single person feels like they should be able to own a gun because, heaven forbid, if they don't have one, they're going to be vulnerable and exposed. So the question the question I'll ask you as women is, do you ever feel the need in your professional? I know that you ride the train, for example. Would you ever feel like owning a gun would save you from the perils of train ridership?
Let me tell you something. If I owned a gun, I'd be shooting myself in the ass like Plaxico Burress. Because that is the kind of person that I am. I'm more afraid of me with the gun than someone else stepping to me. I'm okay with
pepper spray.
My pepper spray. Honestly, that makes me feel so safe.
Really?
Oh my God. And the funny thing with the pepper spray is I'm always like, I'll have it in my hand and my finger on the trigger, but I have to be really careful because I'll also have my thumb on the lock. Because I'm even scared that I'll pepper spray myself. So I'm just like, no. I feel safe with my pepper spray.
I can't see you holding a gun.
Right?
Your nails would get in the way.
Really cute, like pearl pink one.
Sparkly. But I mean, okay, so an assailant comes at you and is enamored by your voluptuousness. Okay, and he
wouldn't even need to come at me. Just get my number. No, but go ahead. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
But okay, somebody comes at you, right?
Uh-huh.
And let's say you were to have a gun. Okay, first of all, you would need lessons. Right? And I can't see you taking the time to even get lessons. And so there's this idea out there that, oh, everybody should own a gun. Right. I know a lot of people that aren't coordinated enough to use a knife to cut vegetables.
Right. It's a very good point.
Do we want these people to have a firearm?
Very bad idea.
All right. How about that kid the other day that killed his own parent because he accidentally was playing with a gun and it went off and it killed an individual?
Why is a kid playing with a gun?
Exactly. Because they're proliferated in our society. So I ask you, Tehu, you have tough clients. One of them may go postal. And what are you instructed as a professional to do? Is it permissible for you to have a firearm?
No, actually, it isn't at all. And my situation is slightly different because though I work with high risk populations. Some of my colleagues are working in prisons, so they're really working with more high risk populations. But mine isn't as severe. We're not. A lot of my clients, they are trying to make a change. They're actively trying to come away and step away from that gangster lifestyle, if that was a part of their lives, and make better choices. So their encounter with me is one of hope and change, and they come at peace because it's a place of acceptance and a place of being forthcoming and comfort. So it's a completely different interaction that I have. However, the children of these clients, occasionally I have very difficult situations where I'm actually constantly seeking supervision because the children have grown up in very violent homes. They've seen lots of things. And, you know, they could be prime candidates, any single one of them, because there's so much anger and hostility and resentment in them that if it's not resolved, and we're talking about kids as young as 7 years old, that if it's not resolved and the therapists don't get on top of it in terms of the work, they could be very well the potential candidates that unfortunately could go out there and cause damage. Especially if, but the question is if they can get their hands on the firearm weapon, which is not that hard to do. That's the scary part of it. We can't save everybody out there, but we can restrict the access of what they can get their hands on.
Yeah, and that's the issue is, you know, if I'm a mentally challenged person, but I'm able enough to get somebody else to come with me to the gun shop, right? And if that person, the mentally sane person, goes to the background check, then I, the mentally ill person, then have the right to that arm. And so I pose this question to you out there. Do you think that these very recalcitrant senators and representatives, because Gabby Giffords, right? This is the woman in Arizona who was shot and by a miracle was saved. I think if the members of Congress, if they had a loved one or if they themselves were the victims of senseless gun violence, I think that might change hearts. And I think we've become very desensitized as a society. We hear, oh, these many people died. These many people died in San Bernardino. Bless them. You know, they were at a county institution that was supposed to help the mentally challenged. Yeah, and of course, it was an act of terrorism, but it was a domestic act of terrorism. They have just come back with the results, and they were not instructed by any foreign source. These were individuals that became radicalized, but they were people here in the United States for a very long time, and they had obviously huge access to weapons, and they annihilated all these people mercilessly. And I wonder, when it hits home, when you actually have suffered a loss because of this senseless gun violence, I think your attitude changes. And so I want to know what you think out there at Ethnically Correct Land on Facebook and on Twitter. Do you think that it has to be an empathetic situation where somebody experiences loss? Because let me tell you, every single funeral that I've sung for the victim of gun violence, I'm pretty sure that the family has a very strong stance against the proliferation of the availability of guns. So this is a topic, obviously, that is charged collectively here. There is unanimity in terms of what we think, and our complete contempt and disregard for them, because we feel that they are useless elements in our society. But many of you may have a different perspective. We are all, of course, very urban folks here. If you are rural and you have an athletic or a pastime in terms of hunting, you may think differently. And I think at some level that may be permissible within our society, or actually it is permissible. And no one is saying that the rights are going to be taken away, but we do have to have sensible legislation that limits it, because one of the strong arguments that is made by individuals who study criminology is the fact that when you make something a little more challenging to get or acquire, that has a disproportionate effect in reducing the incidence of, right? So if you make it a little harder to get a gun, that has a disproportionate effect, because there is a domino sequence that happens. Fewer people have them, fewer people engage in the criminal act. So we really inspire you to tell us what you think, and to really promote this idea that those of us that may not be passionate about it, but if we have strong conviction, we need to voice that to people and say, no, this is not acceptable, and we need to support the president in his agenda, because it is worthwhile for us to think about our security, yes,
absolutely,
but also to think about the fact that innocent lives are being lost and that they matter. They matter to everybody at the table and in our society. Thank you so much for listening. This was a heavy topic, but we, I think, dealt with various aspects of it. from Santa Monica, for our executive producer Dan Howes, for the fabulous Winter White and the equally fabulous Tehu Smythe, I'm Alex Venegas. Thank you.